This in-depth course is tailored for job seekers at all levels, providing you with the essential skills and insights to succeed in behavior-based interviews. While many developers focus on preparing for technical interviews, you should also prepare for the other parts of job interviews. Parth is an experienced instructor and provides a bunch of insider tips and industry expertise. So whether you're targeting a role in a top company or just starting your professional journey, this course is your key to navigating behavioral interviews with ease.
Hello friends. So now we are going to have a full course on how you can master your behavioral interviews. So first let's understand that what is going to be the outline of the course and what you can expect from this course. Number one thing we are going to learn is the introduction and the importance of behavioral interviews, what they are and why do they matter in the actual interview system. Next, we are going to learn about the STAR method. It is a way for you to articulate your answers for the behavioral interview questions so that you can represent them in a better format. Next, we will learn about how you can prepare, research and present your answers in a methodical, tactical manner. And we will talk about all the different strategies that they are about researching yourself, the company you are applying for, the culture you need to understand. And we will go deep with a couple of case studies as well. Plus, we will learn about the different categories of behavioral interviews, and then we will reach to the meat of our problem, that is 50 different behavioral interview questions and what is the intent for those questions and what should be the expected answers that the interviewer is going to look forward. So this is going to be the most important topic. And next, in the end, we will talk about how you can deal with difficult questions. What are some of the non-verbal communication cues you have to understand? And in the very end, we will talk about some resources and follow-ups that would be really useful for your upcoming behavioral interview preparation. Now, first, let me introduce myself really quickly. My name is Parth Vyas and I have been in the IT industry for 10 plus years now. On the side, I run my own YouTube channel called Destination Fang, where I teach about different technical, system design and behavioral interview topics, questions and concerns. So if you want, feel free to go ahead and check it out. It would be really helpful. My hobbies include watching lots of movies, playing lots of Call of Duty and going on lots of hikes. Now, lastly, let me just talk about a few fun facts about myself. So I have masters in computer science. Last year, I became a dad of 2 beautiful twin daughters. And originally I was born and raised in India, but since last 10 years, I have been living in Canada. Now let's see that what are the different types of interviews we can expect to face in any sort of tech interview process. Now, number one is the technical interview, which can vary from either data structure and algorithm related problems, or maybe some technology agnostic or technology specific kind of questions, maybe like Java, Python related problems, or if you are applying something for data scientists, maybe there can be some variations for that technical interview process. Next is a system design interview, where you are typically talking about the broad ocean of computer science and distributed system concepts, where you talk about everything related to how you can build a more resilient and desirable system. If you have to build your own Twitter or Google like system, how would you do that? What are the trade-offs you would consider? And third one is the behavioral interview that we are going to put most of our emphasis on for this portion of the rest of the course. Now, behavioral interviews are very important for tech roles. On top of it, they are also generically applied to all sorts of jobs, because you can imagine every single company wants to hire an employee who is going to be a good culture fit. And the purpose of behavioral interview is to identify that what type of person you are and will you be a good potential candidate to hire or not. So now let's see that what behavioral interviews are. Behavioral interviews are mostly tend to focus on your past experience of what are the things you have done, what are the situations you have faced, what are the experiences you have gained. And based on those experiences, situations and answers you give, the companies or the interviewers would predict that how successful candidate you would be in the future. So rather than focusing on just random questions, they tend to put more emphasis on what you have faced, what you have earned, and what you did in those scenarios. On top of it, what did you learn from that? The purpose of these interviews are quite simple. They want to assess or they want to judge that how good of a candidate you would be, but based on the real life examples and real life experience you have faced in your previous career throughout this point. So they are slightly different from the traditional interviews we used to have, because typically we all have faced some sort of interviews where we are being asked questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? If you are in a situation where you have a conflict with someone, how would you resolve that? Or if you have to do this, or if you have to do that. So basically, typically people used to ask hypothetical questions, and then at some point they realize that rather than focusing on hypothetical scenarios and imagination of candidate, it would be good to understand that what type of situations they have faced and how did they deal with them. So based on those real life examples and experiences, they would be able to judge that how good of a candidate you are, which means they wants to assess your interpersonal skills and problem solving abilities based on your real life experiences and real life examples. So which is quite a major turn from the hypothetical scenarios that previously used to dominate the job market. More focus is put on the examples and specific tasks that you have achieved throughout your career, rather than just random questions or the typical questions that previously used to be the majority of part of the interview. Now the question is, why does behavioral interviews matter so much in the actual hiring process? And the reason is actually quite simple. The behavioral interviews are designed in a manner that they tend to predict your performance based on the answers you give and based on the experiences you have realized. Now, think from the company's perspective. Hiring any single candidate is a very expensive task and very resource intensive task for the companies, because number one, they will have to post the jobs, they will have to go through maybe 100 resumes, then they would have to interview at least 15 to 20 candidates, and the interviewers tend to be the senior level folks, which means the higher and senior level folks are not doing their job, but rather they are spending their working hours interviewing various different candidates. And what if they hire a candidate and after 6 months they realize that that candidate is maybe lazy, or that candidate does not listen to their manager, or does not follow directions, always have issues with all of the co-workers, who is not a good person to work with, all of these issues. And then company would realize that now they might have to replace that person. So if replacing can also come with their own consequences. Maybe they have to pay them some severance package, and once again they would have to go through this whole hiring process to find a better suitable candidate, which means companies really wants to make sure that they vet before they hire any single candidate. And that's why even if you lack in technical skills, it can still be learned, but if you lack in the correct attitude and the right mindset, for sure company is going to reject you immediately. So that is why it becomes really imperative and important for any company to make sure that before they hire someone, they critically judge their skill set, their attitude, how they behave with other people, how should they behave in different teams. And that's why these becomes really important, because behavioral interviews, they help to find the candidate with right attitude, right mindset, who is going to thrive in their jobs, who is going to take the company forward with their vision and with their culture. So that is why behavioral interviews are really important. On top of it, behavioral interviews are actually a great tool for the interviewer as well. How? Because you can dictate the pace and the answers. You can explain, and this is an open ground for you. So treat it as an opportunity for you to convey your interviewer that, hey, these are the things I have been through, these are the situations I was in, I faced all of these scenarios, these are the things I learned from that, this is my attitude, this is how I behave, this is how I deal with tough situation. So it's an open ground for you to score as many goals as you can. And think of even the real life scenarios. Why do great teams always wants to hire someone who has been performing really good for last two to 3 years? Because they know that they have the quantifiable measures, or they have the real numbers to present that this player, maybe Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi, why they are good or why they are goats. Because consistently they have shown that they can perform well under pressure situation, they can deal with different tasks, different teams, different championships. They have lost, they have been battered, they have been injured, and still they jump back, still they came back. So they have the right attitude, and that what makes them elite athletes. And same thing applies for any single company as well, that they wants to hire a person with the correct mindset, that even if they make mistakes, they learn from that. And that's why it's really important for you to pay utmost attention to the behavioral portion of the interview as well. You can be the greatest technical mind in the world, but if you don't have the correct mindset, no company is going to hire you, because no one wants to work with someone who is not a nice person. So always put more emphasis on the way you convey yourself, the way you are going to present yourself in an interview, because this is an open ground for you. Now let's talk about the way you are going to approach the questions in an actual behavioral interview. And for that, we have a very popular method called STAR method. It is nothing but a mechanism for you to formulate and articulate your answers before you present them to the interviewer for any given question. STAR is nothing but the abbreviation for situation, task, action, and result. And what the interviewer wants you to do is that they want you to completely give all the answers in this sequence. So this is a timeline that you have to follow in order to provide your answer. So let's try to break down the STAR method, and we will try to understand it with some examples as well. So first, what you need to do is, whenever any question is being asked at you, what you can do is you can explain that what was the situation, what was the backstory on why you needed to do that thing, in which you are providing all the context. You are providing that what happened, what was the scenario, what was happening with the company, what was being asked for you to do, what was the overall scenario that would impact your judgment or your decision. Next, you will have to define that what was the task that was expected of you, that what you needed to work on, what you needed to complete, how you needed to do that, what were some of the additional constraints, and you provide all of that information. For the action, you need to provide the exact specific things that you did. And I'm providing more emphasis on the word you, because many times we tend to feel that in a larger project, we always say that, yeah, we were trying to build this and we were trying to do that, and then we ended up doing this, and then our team completed this. We try to give credit to other people because it would seem like we are a person who feel gratitude for the work of others and appreciates that. And of course, you should have that quality, no issues with that. But in the interview, the interviewer is trying to judge what you specifically did, what you were responsible for, and what were the actions that you took. So you need to provide those actions. And last thing would be that what was the result that was achieved, how did you do that, and what improvements that made based on the actions you took. So see the whole story, that you are explaining everything and then you are saying that what you need to do. It's just like a movie. It's a timeline. You are going in one sequence from one point A to point B while explaining everything that was asked in the context of the question. Now let's try to think of this with an example. Maybe the interviewer asks you a question that, give me an example where you had a disagreement with your product manager or with your supervisor, and how did you deal with that situation? So you can give some example like this. First, you would define what was the situation. So situation could be that you already had a company that had a very nice tech stack on maybe Microsoft Azure, and you had a lot of services and applications already up and running. But for that time, your manager wanted to create the microservice cluster from the existing monolith application, and it needed to be done on an urgent and immediate basis. So for that, if they had to deploy everything in the cloud, maybe there were some bureaucracies or some process that you might have to follow that would have caused some additional time constraint. So that is why the manager's approach was that, because we needed to get this done as quickly as possible, can you move everything on the on-premises servers, and once we deploy in the production, maybe we can think about what we need to do later, because managing the monolith application was becoming a huge burden. So this was the situation. Now the task on your hand was that you were responsible for creating or breaking down that monolith application into the cluster of microservices, and you maybe the team was short staffed and you were tasked to complete this by this time and date and deadline, but your approach was that since the rest of the company is already working on the cloud computing and you are trying to become a cloud native company where you are trying to get rid of all the on-premise servers and devices, maybe you can mention that because even though manager explicitly said that, hey, this would speed up the production and we need to ramp this up completely and pretty quickly, your suggestion was that based on the experience, it would make more sense to deploy all of these things in the cloud and create a cloud native app from the scratch rather than building everything from the ground up and then deploying in the company server and then once again providing or adding additional resources to move them to the cloud eventually. So this was the situation and this was the task that you needed to do, and this was the disagreement between yourself and your manager. Next, you can talk about that what were the actions you took. So as an action, I explained to my manager, I convinced them that hey, these are the different challenges we currently have. Since we are already trying to get rid of the on-premise servers, they would be decommissioned soon, and even if we build everything right now and we migrate everything, though the development and deployment might be faster, but still we would have to provide an additional resources in order to move all of these once again back to the cloud. So why not we just spend all the effort in one time and build a cloud native application that is going to be more resilient, and it would serve the company better in the long run. So this was the discussion you had, and then later as sort of the actions, you did some calculation that how much time and effort and resources will it take for you to move to the on-premise and then once again move to the cloud, or if you have to build everything from scratch and directly move to the cloud, what would be the differences, what are going to be the pros and cons of each approach, what are going to be the benefits. And after providing all of the resources and all of the details, you explained to your manager, and then manager came to an agreement that okay, maybe it would make more sense to deploy to the cloud rather than relying on the on-premise servers that is already going to be decommissioned. So as an action, you had your monolith application broken down into a very good cluster of microservices that got deployed in the cloud, and now you have a more resilient cloud native service. So this can be your answer in the STAR method, where you break down every single component and you explain the pros and cons of each one of them. You walk the interviewer through the scenario and explain that what were the exact specific actions you took, how did you dealt with the disagreement, did you just completely discarded the approach from the manager, or were you listening on both sides of the coin, did you properly assess the situation, did you analyze, how would you do that? And after you give this kind of answer, it is going to be much more impactful. Plus, the interviewer would be able to follow along throughout your whole story and whole journey. So once you give this answer, the interviewer can have better follow-up questions and they would know you better, that you are the person who takes into the consideration of all the things. You think about the long term, you think that what is going to be the best for the company rather than just getting the immediate thing done for the sake of doing it. So these are the things that leave a lasting impact on the interviewer's mind. On top of it, it is always going to be really good practice to always frame your answers in this scenario. That is why STAR method is really important, and always whenever you are trying to answer any question, make sure that you lay out the situation first and then you move or build on top of it. Follow the timeline, and this is going to be really easy for interviewer to follow. On top of it, you would be able to explain the whole thing, and you can also recall the same scenario on your mind as well, that okay, initially my manager reached out to me and then we had this discussion and then we had this discussion, I did this thing behind the scenes, I learned about this, I created these charts or these comparisons between both the available approaches, and then we made a quantifiable and concrete decision that it would be better to go with approach A or approach B based on these scenarios, and this was the task you did and this was the result you achieved. So it really looks nice. And always make sure that whenever you are trying to build your answers, you are framing them in the STAR method. For that, you might need to do some practicing behind it. And we are going to talk about all of this in the later part of the video, that how can you prepare better. But make sure that you are aware about the STAR methodology, because more and more companies, they want their answers to come in this frame. Okay, so after understanding what STAR method is, now let's dive deep into how do you actually start preparing for different stories, different answers and different scenarios. For that, you will actually have to do some back work and then we will move forward. So let's understand that the very first thing you need to do in order to prepare for your behavioral interviews, that is to self-reflect. You will have to identify that what are the things you are good at, what are the things you are not good at, and how can you improve yourself. So for that, you always needs to go and make sure that you are using the correct and different methods to verify that what are the personal strengths you carry. Some of the methods you can think of is maybe asking questions to other, self-reflecting on past experiences, getting feedback maybe from your manager, from your co-worker, or from your ex-employers, reaching out to different people, thinking or researching on the current situation you are in. And many times this may sound odd, but many times anonymous boards can be really helpful. And why am I saying all of these things? Like, you can choose whatever you want. You can go ahead and start journaling if you want. The reason I'm saying about anonymous boards is because many times if you explain your situation in places like Reddit or Blind or someplace, most of the people, yeah, there will be some trolls, but most people are going to be neutral and they won't know you personally. So they would completely be non-biased towards you. So that can sometimes work in your favor, but it's a slippery slope. So you need to be very careful with anonymous feedback. But apart from that, there are a lot of different methods to self-reflect and self-identify that what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. And over the course of the period, you must have experienced and learned something. You have been in this world for a few years now. So for sure, you must have some idea that, hey, these are the things I'm good at, these are the things I'm not good at, and this is how I can frame my answer. If I have to give you an example about my strengths and my weaknesses, like I personally believe that I tend to get really involved in the conversation. I like to communicate with people. Somehow I feel that my communication skills are slightly better. So these would be my strong points. Maybe my weak points, I tend to dive so deep into the introduction, and rather than just saying my things exactly, I try to create a huge preamble before I dive deeper into the main issue. So that can be one of my weaknesses. Many times I tend to procrastinate. So that is another of my weakness. How can I improve upon them? What are the steps I can take? Maybe I can write down my goals. Maybe I can do some things to make changes. And these self-reflection tools would make you a better person in the long run. So identify your strengths and weakness. That would be the number one step. Not only in terms of behavioral interviews, but also in terms of on your day-to-day activities and daily self-reflection. Because with that, over the course of a certain period of few weeks or even few years, you would become a significantly better person in your work ethic, in your day-to-day activity, and also as an effective leader, mentor, or a team co-worker. So always have that habit. Next, you need to make sure that you reflect on your relevant past experiences, because for any single behavioral interview, they are always going to dive deeper into the questions regarding what have you done in the past, what type of challenges you faced, how did you came up with that, what was your achievement, what did you learn from it, how can you self-improve, how can you teach other, how can you maybe create impact for your customer. These are going to be the broader type of scenarios that you would be asked on and you would be judged on. So a quick question or a quick tip: whenever you are working or whatever the experiences you have faced in your career so far, just start making good points or good stories in some piece of paper. So that would allow you to have those talking points when you actually get to that stage in actual behavioral interview. Because many times in any behavioral interview, they are going to be asking you somewhere between 4 to 10 or 15, somewhere between 5 to 20 questions, depending on how lengthy the interview are, what type of difficulty they want to have, and what type of questions they are suggesting. Now for these questions, you don't want to repeat the same story or same scenario again and again and again. It would make really good impact if you can have different scenarios and different considerations for all the things you did. So that is going to play out in your favor. So but many times it becomes really difficult to recall all of these things on the go when you are actually in that interview. So it's always better to prepare beforehand, have all of those experiences noted down. Maybe you can create some short bullet points for your STAR method. You can say that, okay, the situation was that manual deployment was getting out of hand and we were having a lot of issues. Task was that you needed to deploy something really quickly and it needed to be in the production as soon as possible. The action you took is that you started working on the automated DevOps deployment scenario on the side. You took care of the high priority items immediately, and the low priority items you refrained from pushing to the production, and then you kept them aside. And then first you build those automated CI/CD pipelines, and then in the end you deploy everything using CI/CD pipeline. And as a result, now you are seeing that all the deployments in your company are happening automatically using the automated deployments. So this can be one of the examples. So over in this scenario, you can write bullet points as situation, manual deployments, task, maybe deploy something to production, and also build CI/CD pipelines, action, you started building CI/CD pipelines, and result, all the things became automated. What were the challenges you find? So you can add few more points for that. So I would personally suggest to create at least 15 or 20 experiences based on different scenarios that you have faced in your career or you faced on a day-to-day basis, and just note them down somewhere and have it ready. Because once you have those experiences, the moment you would see them and you would understand that, okay, these are the things I've already done, it becomes really easy to convey that in an actual interview. That it wouldn't even feel like an interview. It would feel like a normal conversation between two people where you are just going over all the experiences you face, and it would be like, remember when during this time this was the situation, this is how we dealt with it, and it was pretty fun, and I learned this, and from based on this experience, next time I wouldn't repeat this. So it can be a great exercise to reflect on the relevant experiences that you have currently faced so far. And that brings us to our next point. That is, once you realize that what are your strengths and weaknesses, once you have those stories ready, now when you come closer towards the actual interview, start diving deep into the true requirements of any particular job you are applying for. Understand what type of seniority for that job is. Understand that what type of requirement the company is having. In every single job description, companies mention that what would be the generic technical skills needed. On top of it, what would be on the day-to-day basis or duties or behavioral skills required. Maybe you have to deal with external customers, so you need some sales experience. Maybe you need to deal with a team of large individuals. Maybe you need to lead a team of different people. Maybe you need to behave as like a tech lead or a senior lead in any particular position. So realize that what job description is suggesting to, and then reflect on the relevant experiences you had. Try to create mapping between all the things that you have done and you have learned so far, and make sure that not to ignore the job description, and ask the same questions to either the hiring manager or your recruiter beforehand. That what type of expectation the company is having. Is there anything about the company culture that should I know before you go deeper into the behavioral interview? Because this is going to give you a great insight and idea about what type of questions that you can be judged on or you can be asked. And maybe you can have those specific experiences ready. Because that comes in handy for some different companies, because many companies, they have a very specific set of culture and they need very specific set of individuals with the correct mindset. And we will learn more about that in the upcoming case studies that we are going to study. But make sure that once you have the strengths, weakness, and self-reflection, you have these story points, and then you go very deep into the job requirements, so that you have that matching criteria or matching matrix between what is needed and what you currently have. So it becomes pretty easy, and your odds of successing in the interview becomes exponentially high. Next, you should never ignore the company culture and company values that a company tend to behave on and thrive on. most of the scenario, what I have personally felt is every single company tend to have a similar work structure where they wants to do what's best for the company, what's best for their customer, what's best for their employees. They wants to build product more efficiently, more securely, more reliably. They wants to have people who work in accordance with each other, who are not having any like lot of significant issues. They try to work as a fine-tuned machine and as a well-built team where everyone is trusting each other to complete the job done. And if someone is lacking behind, then they want other people to push that person forward, because we are only as strong as the weakest link. So they wants to take all the employees to do better, because companies have realized after a lot of research and a lot of investing and a lot of consulting with a lot of big and small companies, that if the employees are happy and if you have like true leaders and true connections amongst the employees, they tend to drive the project and team forward. And I can give you an example for that. See any open source project. There is no motivation for anyone to work in that open source project, because they are not incentivized in terms of compensation. They are not incentivized in terms of any recognition or any monetary gains, but still those products have significantly changed the world. Think of Wikipedia. It is a community driven, community built, people build entire software or ecosystem that has helped millions of people all across world. And it is all being done just because people are passionate about that overall game or overall goal. And it's a rewarding mechanism that comes with being recognized of doing something greater good or doing something better for the world. And that feeling enables people to achieve something more. And same thing companies wants to develop in their own employees. That's why you see all of these big companies, they are trying to give all of these perks and these benefits to their employees, because they realize that if the employees are happy and if they are not distracted, they would build products that is going to take the company all the way off the charts. So for sure, research that any specific company you are applying for, what type of culture they possess, what are the key values that they have. And that's where the conversation with recruiter, the conversation with hiring manager, maybe some ex-employees, that comes in handy. Maybe read through some blogs, try to go on and search on YouTube. If that company is popular enough, maybe someone has posted some videos about what type of work culture they have and how do they promote it, and how you can leverage yourself for that interview, for that any particular company. So these are going to be really important mechanism. Plus you can also see that, okay, company has these important values and these are my personal values and these are my personal experience. Once again, you have better matching answers for those questions when they come in during your behavioral interview. Now we are going to see a very interesting case study. This is one of the most popular case studies, and it's for the company Netflix. And honestly, Netflix has one of the most unique cultures that I have seen in any company. So that's why I really wanted to discuss about Netflix. Netflix at some point decided that we are going to treat all of our employees as elite sport team. We are not just going to have them as normal employees. And one thing you know about elite sports team is that number one, all players, they work for the good of the team. Number two, every single player has to be on the top of their game. And if someone is slacking or someone is lacking behind, coaches tend to push them forward, give them honest opinion, honest reviews, make sure that they are working the best they can, they are achieving the best they can. And you know what, like right now Netflix started hiring some recent graduate, but a couple of years back until then, they only had one level throughout their entire company, and that was senior software developer. Of course, different people would report to different people, and depending on seniority, there would be some pay differences, but still Netflix would pay the highest amount of salary amongst all the companies in the US. They at some point they were paying somewhere around like $565,000. That was the average salary for every single employee or every single engineer at Netflix. So imagine more than $500,000 for an engineer, which means their compensation or their monetary problems has completely gone. Number two, Netflix is one of the only companies that does not believe in giving bonuses. that their mentality is that we don't providing bonus because we know that we are providing them enough things that they don't have to keep running forward for that bonus, but they would rather do good throughout the year without the incentive of bonus because they are already extremely well paid. Plus, next thing is that they have the option to receive the entire salary whether in cash or just as base salary, or if they want they control that whether they want like 10% stocks, 20% stock, 50% stocks, which is pretty cool. Because if you see any other company like maybe Google, Facebook, Microsoft, any other company, they have a very strict stock vesting schedule and they decide how you are going to get paid. But Netflix is like, we treat our employees like adults. We know that they are going to do what's good for them and what's good for Netflix, what's good for their company. And we are going to treat them as elite sports players. So they have this elite sports mentality where every single player is responsible to bring team forward, bring team up. They are going to be extremely well compensated. They have unlimited paid time off. They have unlimited benefits, lot of cool perks and stuff and everything like that. On top of it, they decided that they are going to be fully cloud. They are always going to be cutting edge, innovative. They are going to do the best thing possible. And they have already achieved that, which is quite insignificant. And the other thing is that not only being a elite sport team, they're also going to be thoroughly honest with their employees. And what do I mean by thoroughly honest? They have a very strong feedback culture. Every single time, every single meeting or maybe any project, if you are doing something good, you are doing something bad, you are doing something horrible, you are going to get an honest feedback and you are going to get it immediately. And it doesn't even matter that maybe you just joined in and you are at slightly junior level position, and compared to someone who has been in Netflix for 10 years, if you see that person is making some mistake, they actually encourage you that you should go ahead and reach out to that person and honestly tell them that these are the mistakes you are doing and this would be my feedback and this is how you can make it better. And they really appreciate that feedback culture. So even if you interview at Netflix, let's say that you did not get a job for some reason, they're going to be very honest with you that, hey, these are the things we asked, these are the mistakes you made, this is our feedback, maybe it can help you out in the future, but currently we cannot move forward with that. And that mentality makes Netflix what it is today. Honestly, Netflix has been a disruptor. They have created an entire industry of online streaming. It was one of the only services. Now they have this very interesting keepers test. And what does keepers test mean is that managers are only being asked one question. And that question is that if this person in your team decides to leave Netflix today, are you going to fight to keep that person? And if the answer is yes, that's great, that person is doing his or her job very well. But if manager answers that no, I would not fight to keep that person and I would let that person go, if that is the case, Netflix would by default let that person go. They would be like, we don't want to wait for you to decide that I want to leave Netflix. If you are not performing at the level or at the elite sports level, we don't want you in the Netflix. And of course, they are going to give you hefty severance package and they have all of these cool benefits. So that's the thing. That is such a unique thing about Netflix, that they have a very unique sports mentality. They have a very unique keepers test and the feedback culture. So if I'm preparing for a Netflix interview, I'm going to keep these things in mind. I will pick the experiences I had where I had to give someone honest feedback or take someone's honest feedback and then work on myself and improve myself and improve the system and do the good for the company. So I'm going to do all of these things because I studied and I realized that this is the culture Netflix is promoting. So you need to understand that how these companies work. And if you realize their work culture, you can actually be in a very good position for yourself to secure that job. Now let's talk about the second case study, that is Amazon. Now, Amazon has always been a topic of conversation amongst tech engineers. A lot of people really like Amazon, a lot of people hate Amazon. They have lot of different products and lot of different teams, and they are one of the biggest tech companies in the world. That's for sure. Now the thing is, Amazon also has a very unique culture and very unique set of skills and personal values. The different thing about Amazon is that they actually believe in something called leadership principles. And few years back, Amazon came up with these huge list of different leadership principles, and they say that every single employee needs to follow these leadership principles in order to be counted as a successful candidate at Amazon. So some of the leadership principles are, I have listed over here, that it's like customer obsession, becoming the earth's best employer, or think big, how can you deliver results pretty quickly, and a lot of other things. Now the thing is, if you are applying or if you are preparing for Amazon, I would definitely recommend you to go over these leadership principles, maybe create 1 or 2 examples for each principle, because you are not going to be asked all 16 of the principles, but most likely throughout your 6 or 7 rounds of interview, you would be asked at least somewhere between 4 to 10 different leadership principles. And it wouldn't be that, hey, tell me an example about think big, or tell me an example where you have to earn the trust. It wouldn't be directly, but the question would be framed around these leadership principles. And then there would be follow-up questions on the answers you would give. So if I'm preparing for Netflix, I would prepare for the answers based on like keeper stress, feedback culture, how I changed the company, or how I'm brutally honest, how do I work with the team, or how do I work with the upper stakeholders or whatnot. If I'm preparing something for like Amazon, I would prepare on leadership principles. I would create some examples for each one of them. I would reflect on myself. And this is how you can prepare beforehand, so that it's gonna be very helpful for your upcoming jobs or upcoming interviews. Now, the interesting thing is you only need to prepare once, because if let's say that Amazon has 16 leadership principles, if you prepare all the answers for each one of the leadership principles, even tomorrow if you go to some other company, maybe Microsoft or maybe Google, if they ask some questions, you would still be able to answer even if you didn't prepare. Why? Because these are the common qualities that's going to cover the majority or most common part. So that's why I'm saying that all you need to do, the preparation part for behavioral interview is quite easy and quite simple. All you need to do is just realize what are your strengths, realize where you need to improve, what are your weaknesses, do self-reflection, note down all the experiences, and then do the research about the job you are trying to apply, and then maybe learn something about the company culture and curate your answer using the STAR method. Okay, now let's talk about the different categories of behavioral interview questions. So number one category is teamwork, that companies wants to know that how easily and how efficiently can you work within a team, and are you like a teamwork kind of person or not. Next one is a problem solving skills. So if some ingenuine problem occurs, some unexpected scenario arise, are you able to deal with that or not? Next category is adaptability. Are you able to adapt to a new situation, a new scenario? How easily can you adjust, and what are the things you need to do? Next one is the communication. And the last category is the leadership. Now, leadership category is typically reserved for people higher up in the experience chain, but still, even if you are at the junior level, still you can be asked some questions regarding leadership, and you can give examples based on the small amount of experience you have gained, or maybe some of the projects you did outside of your actual job. Maybe during your university you had some initiatives and you can define leadership over there. So there can be different scenarios. Now let's try to understand each category by its own, by some of the key points that are associated with that category, and then we will start diving deeper into the 50 behavioral questions. So number one category is teamwork and collaboration. Now the companies wants to check that how easily can you cooperate with the person. Are you the person who is open-minded to different scenarios? Do you have the empathy to understand what other person in the team is going through? How can you make the best out of the bad situation? How can you take everyone together? How can others leverage from the work you are doing, or how can you leverage the work that others are doing? Can you collaborate with other people or other teams or other members, new members, or maybe some senior fellow? All of these kinds of things they want to ensure. Next one is the problem solving skills. So obviously with the rapid change in the world, every single day new problem arise, or maybe 10 new problems arise, and you need to have the critical thinking to make the changes. On top of it, you need to have some sort of creativity in generating the problem, solving the problem. You need rigorous analysis skills to analyze that what is the current situation, what you have done in the past, what have worked, what has not worked, how can you make the best out of the bad situation, how can you convince other stakeholders about the problem. If you have identified some new problems, what should be your approach, how can you take on it. If something is much more complicated, very difficult, how would you work upon that. So there are a lot of things you have to consider and rationally come up with the reasoning in order to solve the problem in the efficient manner. So for sure there would be some questions regarding the problem solving in your behavioral interview. Next one is the adaptability. Are you a person who is flexible enough to change? Can you be resilient in the face of adversity? If there are some completely unexpected items are happening, are you able to cope up with that? If there are new changes, new policies, or new rules that you have to abide by, how quickly can you manage them? If you have to learn some new skills, do you have the right attitude to basically take on something completely new that you knew of nothing about, and still you dive deeper into that and build the solutions around that new piece of technology? Because IT industry is continuously changing. It's a very frugal industry, and every day new technology or new system or new problems comes in, and you have to be adaptable towards solving them. Best example, Log4j. Everyone knows that the Log4j vulnerability, probably one of the most popular libraries that was used all across world, and suddenly everyone had to change their version, and then everyone had to be adaptable on how quickly can you change the version, how quickly can you adapt the vulnerability. And that raised a lot of questions on how resilient your systems are, how can you make that improvement, how can you significantly change those processes, and that sort of thing. And the last one, or the second last one, is communication, because of course communication is one of the very key skills that you need in order to succeed at your job. I'm not saying that everyone should be proficient in maybe English or French or some other language. Whichever language you speak, it doesn't matter, as long as you can convey your thoughts in a profound manner and you are well articulate in sort of the words you use or the way you communicate with all the different people. You need to be clear, concise in your thought and in your communication, and it should not be vague, generic kind of things. Be specific, be on point, give clear examples, and that is going to help you tremendous in your career. On top of that, one of the key important parts for any communication skills is actually active listening or mindful listening. That you need to be in the moment and understand that what is the exact scenario. And for that, rather than just proving your point or throwing your point, you will actually have to listen first. And if you develop this ability, it's going to significantly improve your odds in not only being successful at any interview, but also being greatly successful at your company, because great leaders also tend to be great listeners as well. So make sure you do that and you are articulate in your thought process and the way you answer different things. On top of it, believe it or not, there is always going to be some level of bureaucracy in any different company, and in order to come across that, you will have to be diplomatic. You will have to understand that what are the trade-offs you can make, what is going to be the give and take in this situation, how can you make the most optimal or most efficient approach. And for that, you need to have some sort of diplomatic personality or diplomacy in your workings. Because let's say that you are given two problems and you both seems urgent at the moment, but you can only do one. So which one will you pick? How can you make that judgment call? What are the constraints you are going to consider? What are going to be your pros and cons for picking one over the other? What is going to make that assumption clear, concise, and how would you communicate that with the team that you are saying essentially no to, that hey, I won't be able to work on this right now? How would you be able to communicate that? For that, you need the skills of diplomacy, and make sure that you work upon that. And last one is leadership. So as I mentioned, leadership is one of the most important qualities, because without a strong leader, no company can thrive. And that's why the higher up you are in your experience level and the better sort of positions you are applying for, they are going to be keen on focused on the leadership, that how can you help people under you, how can you help with the different responsibilities, can you handle various portfolios, can you handle team of different people, can you handle an individual who is a tough person to handle, how do you promote your team, how do you motivate others. So all of these kinds of things, they are going to come into the picture, that can you take new initiatives, are you going to be a responsible person, are you going to be accountable for the things that are currently happening, and how can you make it more resilient, what would be your contribution on more promoting others, motivating others. So make sure that you need to have leadership qualities as well, but this vastly depends on the people with higher levels of experience. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the most important topic for this entire course, that is 50 different behavioral interview questions, and we are going to discuss each one of them in a very good detail. Now, before we start diving deeper into the questions, first let's understand few things very clearly. Number one, I have taken 10 questions from each of the 5 different categories that we just talked about, which means you are going to get a comprehensive list of almost all sorts of questions based on all of these 5 categories, and these are the main categories that you are going to be judged upon, because majority of the companies, they are looking for a specific mindset that is going to be like involved with different teams, very good at communication, at leadership, at problem solving and things like that. So most of the questions would be typically covered by these 50 questions, and even if you might not get the exact same wording as the question, the intent is going to be same. So for each of the questions that we are going to discuss about, I also urge you that at the same time, you also try to create your own answer for each one of the questions. I'm not saying that for all 50 questions, write down the answer and then mug up all the answers. But in your mind, you should have some idea that, hey, if I encounter this question, this is going to be the story or scenario or experience I'm going to explain. Or if I talk about, or if this is the question, maybe this could be the intent behind the question. So let me frame my answer in that manner. And for each of the question, once again, go over the list of experiences you have built upon so far. Maybe I explained, like, have somewhere between 10 to 20 experiences that are different from each other, and that should cover, or that should broadenly show the good sides of the things that you have been through, and maybe even if there were some challenging situations, what were you able to learn from that. So have that list ready, create a star formatted bullet points. I'm not saying that have all the entire 45-second answer written on some document, because that's going to take a lot of time. Just have some bullet points and be open to discussion and be in the moment. So these are going to be some advices. And last thing I would like to say is that any question you are going to be asked in an interview, be prepared that there are going to be at least 3 to 5 follow-ups depending on the interviewer and depending on how in depth the answer you give. So for sure, for any single question, they must have prepared some follow-up questions that they are going to ask you. Some follow-up will occur from your own answer. So it's also in your hand that which direction you want to take your answer or next question into. So you can also tweak that depending on the current answer you give. But more or less, be prepared for the follow-up. And once again, I'm giving you an honest opinion. Don't try to fake answers in an interview. If you haven't faced any exact specific situation, just be honest and say that I never had to face this exact situation in my past, but if I have to solve this would be my approach. This takes you way further than if you just try to make some random story and then you get caught with the facts and then they ask you follow-ups and you are not able to give the answer, and then they would realize that you are essentially bluffing your way into it. Okay, so now I have given you the introduction about what is going to be the format and expectation for these questions. Now let's start with the type of questions. Okay, so number one topic we are going to select is going to be teamwork and collaboration. So let's talk about question number one. This is, give an example of a challenging and successful team project that you were part of. And then for this question, prepare for a follow-up question, or also this can also be part of the same question, that what made it successful and what made it challenging. Now this is a question with a lot of different moving dimensions and perspectives. Number one thing is you need to explain that a type of team project that you were in. So maybe you can give some more information about what type of team were there. Maybe there were multiple teams involved. What was your contribution? What were you are trying to achieve? Next, you need to focus on the challenging part. So that what was the challenging scenario for this type of exact experience that you are describing. Maybe there were tight deadlines. Maybe there were some existing product issues that needed to be fixed on an immediate basis. Maybe there was some priority 1 or priority 2 incident that happened and that needs to be resolved in the moment. In order to resolve that, many teams are working. Maybe there is a threat coming from the outside and you have to deal with it. If not, company is essentially losing money every single day. So there can be many different challenges for any particular projects. Maybe there is a challenge related to tech stack. Maybe there is a challenge related to number of resources. Maybe you don't have sufficient technology. Maybe you don't have sufficient amount of money that you can spend for the project, and then you have to make the choices according to that. There are a lot of different challenging situations, but now on top of being a challenging situation, you will also have to explain that how was it a successful project. So typical definitions of success is on time and on budget. These tend to be the standard definition, but on top of it, in order for a successful team project, you can also explain that how did your team learn from that, how did you complete it, that how did you change the ways of how things happens in your company, and this became like a framework for all the subsequent projects. So this was in itself an key inception project in your journey. This can be a very good question to ask at the beginning, because this is going to open up so many different questions and so many different follow-ups. Plus, it will give you a great contribution, great way to shine as well. For sure, after this question, they are going to focus more on that. What were the responsibilities of the team? What were your responsibilities? What were your contribution? So always, whenever you are giving answer related to teamwork or different team projects, make sure that you clearly define the distinction of what was your specific duties, because they are only interested in your attitude, your behavior, and the things you had to do and things you learn. So you can give the broad example of the whole scenario and then start putting more emphasis on what you were responsible for and how did you behave in this situation. Okay, now let's go to the second question, that is, tell me a time when you had to deal with a difficult client or a difficult coworker. So once again, the question is open to interpretation. Difficult client, difficult coworker. You can give an example of each one of them. This is a very common scenario. Maybe you are working in a company or where you are directly dealing with the client, or you are in some sort of consultant position. So you have to work with a lot of different companies or vendors or engagements, and maybe something happened. Why the client was being difficult? What was the overall scenario? You need to explain all of these things. Now, let me first give you an example of a difficult client. Then I'll give you an example for the difficult coworker. Okay. For the difficult client, you can talk about that, what made them trigger. Maybe they were unhappy with your company from the beforehand. Maybe they didn't like the products of your company. Maybe they had some competitor who was providing a better deal. Maybe you were not responding to their queries. So you can say that, yeah, this was the difficult situation. The client was not personally difficult towards you, but overall this was the situation and they were not willing to move forward with the solution. So the approach can be that you explained, you reached out to them, you try to listen that what were their exact concerns, you gave them a time frame on the potential fixes, and make sure that you stayed on that time frame and you committed towards that, and in the end you were able to finally come up with a solution. This can be a way to deal with any difficult client or client. And in order to deal with a difficult coworker, of course, this is a very common scenario. Now, for the difficult coworker, you will have to understand that why the coworker is being difficult towards you. Maybe that person is just the way that they are always behaving like that with everyone else, or is there any specific bias against you, or they are just being mean towards you. So make sure that is the case. If that is the case, always, before taking any further steps or actions, just make sure that you reach and speak with the coworker. Try to understand their concerns, why they are why you feel that they are being difficult towards you. And in my opinion, this should mostly close out all the differences that you might had. So maybe this can be a great way to move forward. And if not, you can also try to involve your manager or a project manager if things get to that level. But needless to say, so this can be your answer in order to explain this type of scenario. Now let's move on to the next question. Can you describe a time when you had to deal with a team member who wasn't pulling their weight? So I actually faced this kind of situation in one of my previous roles, and I can give you my experience. So we were working on a project, and we realized that one of the other developers, they were not fulfilling their commitments towards the task that they were being assigned to, and then that was causing a strain on the existing project. So that developer was reasonably good, like there were no issues with him, but suddenly he started doing that. So I reached out to him. I asked him, hey, what is the issue? Is there something wrong that is going on? Why you are not able to do that? And I asked that in a personal meeting, and I realized that one of very close family members of that particular co-worker was actually really sick and was in a very critical condition in the hospital. So that co-worker was pretty stressed about that situation of that family member, maybe like fighting for the life and death in the hospital, and that was causing him all sorts of anxiety issues. Plus because that family member staying in the hospital, the overall responsibilities were way too much. He had to manage everything at home and then everything at the hospital, and then traveling here and there, and medicines and extra expenses and whatnot. So I learned that this was the situation. I asked him that, do you want me to speak with the project manager or team manager? And he was like, yeah, maybe we can talk about it. We discussed the situation, and the managers were like, you take couple of weeks off, don't worry about the work, just take care of your family, nothing comes more important. So they gave him that freedom. On our side, like all of us, our team members, we distributed the work that coworker was doing, and then we dealt with that situation. Now the thing is, the first instinct for us was to blame everything that this person is not able to do the work, but we realized that there was a very specific reason that why they were not able to pull their weight, because they were under this unexpected scenario. And then once that coworker came back, he was pretty happy that the team supported him in that hardship time, and then once the things resolved, that employee was back on the performance. So this was a really good learning experience, that many times if you just communicate well, you might understand, and many times you might not know the whole story on why things are the way they are. So always try to find that exact thing or exact reason first before you start judging them, or you start taking harsher or more stricter actions, or where you start to escalate things. Okay, so this can be one of the examples. So this is how I would give the answer, maybe like slightly shorter, not so long, but you get the idea, right? Same way you can also create your own experience, your own story. How would you deal with it if you realize that the team member, after having many communications, still is not pulling their weight and still being lazy or slacker? Then you might have to escalate the issue. You might have to take some responsibilities off of them, because you don't want to jeopardize the project just because one team member is not doing their job. Okay. Next is, how do you handle a situation where you had to disagree with a supervisor? Again, this is going to be one of the most popular questions, because most of the interviews I have been asked this question. So that's why you also sort of be prepared for this. Well, essentially, whenever you have a disagreement with your supervisor, manager, project manager, anyone, number one, what was the reason? Where does the disagreement lies? So the example could be that maybe we were trying to build out a new product or a new project. Suddenly the company at that time had the mandate that everything should be built in the cloud, and we were trying to migrate from on-premises to the cloud. But this new product that we were trying to build on, that needed to be done in a very quick manner, and if we had to go through the cloud native route, maybe it would have taken us longer time. So that's why manager was like, do this right now, deploy it on the on-premises, and then maybe we can start thinking about cloud later. So that was sort of the approach from the manager. On your side, you can say that you were were suggesting that rather than doing double the effort, maybe you can just build it one time and have it cloud native enabled. So this is where the agreement lied. This was the situation. The background was company wanted this thing. Your manager wanted the product to ship out fast in the fastest manner. You wanted it to be done properly by deploying into the cloud. So this was the disagreement. How did you handle the situation? Maybe you had a communication with with your manager. You explain the pros and cons, or you walk together on the pros and cons of each situation. You realize that what was his or her point of view, what was your point of view. You put both the things on the scale, and then with a common consensus you came to a conclusion that okay, this would be the correct path forward, and we agree on this, and then you move forward and you implemented the solution, and then what was the result, you can explain that. So this is a very good example of you conveying that you are thinking about what is going to be the best in the long run. You are also thinking about that if you have a disagreement with your manager, how you are going to approach that, how you are going to convey your pros and cons for each one of the things, and what is your thought process or your mechanism to come up with the most ideal solution that is going to be in agreement with all the available stakeholders. So this can be a great question to ask in an interview as well, and expect that this question might be somewhere down the line. Okay. Next one is describe when you had to use your understanding to lead a team. Again, now the question is, this is on the leadership side as well, also working with the team as well. So if you are already applying for like a leadership position, this question is very evident. They wanted to understand that what are your team leadership abilities. Next thing is, maybe if you're not applying for a team leadership position, but still they want to understand that if you are in a position where you might have to lead a group of people or different team, what would be your approach? So once again, you can think of a scenario that why did you had to lead the team? How did you started leading the team? What was your understanding of each one of the team members? How did you approach them? How did you approach the conflicting views? How did you approach the conflicting priorities? How did you approach, or how did you convey each one of them to stay motivated? So these are all the dimensions that are going to be asked for this question. So for sure, you can think of a scenario where maybe you might not be leading the team, but suddenly you realize that one of your co-worker, they were out on a holiday or vacation, who tend to be at a senior position, and then now you are in a situation where you had to get this task done with the priority basis. So how did you convince other? How did you reach out to different teams? How did you convey the result to the stakeholders? And how did you keep the communication going on top of it, staying up to date on the task that you are trying to finish? Okay, so explain like this, and it would look really good for your answer. Next question is, can you talk about a time when you had to coordinate with different departments to complete a project? Once again, pretty standard question, and always in many projects you are always going to be working with many different teams simultaneously, because some team is working on transaction, like half part of the transaction, you might be working on the other half, there might be some other team who is working on the third part and whatnot. So how did you keep the communication alive? What are your points of contact? How do you do some collaborative activities? How do you build trust between the different teams? If there is any problem arises, how do you deal with different teams? How do you note down everything? How do you keep track of things? How do you keep track of timetable? What are going to be your responsibilities working cross-functionally with the team? If there are conflicting priorities, how you are going to keep track of that? So these are all the things that you can think of considering. Now, next question is, tell me about a time when you had to rely on your presentation skills to influence someone's opinion. So maybe you might be in a sales type position where you have to sell something, or you have to convince a client to maybe buy your product, or understand the importance of the product. So that is where your presentation skills can come into play. Maybe you find some technical issue in your existing system, and you need to explain that situation to all the other stakeholders in the existing company. So even though the thing might be technical, but many times you might have to explain the situation to some business level people who are not so technical. Maybe you have to explain it to your junior team who might not have all the entire idea of the whole ecosystem or whole project. So depending on what type of stakeholder you are trying to explain, your presentation needs to change, and the way you are going to approach the things also needs to change. So if you explain like this, that in order to solve one problem, you have to present the solutions to 3 different teams in 3 different ways, and this are going to be your approaches for each one of them, and this is how you are going to convey them that this is why we need to do this. And if they decide to do it, if you have some sort of like example like this in your past, maybe this can be a great question to showcase that not only you think depending on who you are speaking with, you are also coming up with different approaches and different solutions based on the person you are speaking with or the problem you are trying to solve. So that's a great skill to have, and any company would want a person to have that type of attitude. Next question is, describe a situation where you had to resolve an interpersonal conflict at work. So if there is a conflict going on between 2 members of the team, how would you resolve that? If you realize that there is a conflict going on between 2 different teams, because many times like the 2 teams had to work really close, but also when an issue happens, there is a lot of finger pointing between both the teams, and that's why they might have some disgruntled previous experience, that they have some issues going on between those 2 teams, and that amongst these type of scenarios, how would you approach it? If you have that experience in your past, always feel free to throw out. If you don't have that experience, you can also say that I have never personally experienced this, but if I experience a situation or a question like this, my approach would be to first realize that what is the root cause of problem, why they are being hostile or in disagreement with each other, or why it feels like there is always a conflict going on. And then once you realize the root of the problem, you start to eradicate that problem and start to work upon the solution. So that can be one of the good approaches to take on the question like this. Next one is, how do you approach working in a diverse and inclusive environment? Now this question is like a free hit or like an open goal or penalty goal like that. For sure, the real simple fact is diverse and inclusive teams are always going to be far more superior than a single type of teams, and there is a very clear study for that. Let me give you an example. Back in like 60s or 70s, when the team where the auto manufacturing company, they started building these dummy models that would be put in the cars, and then cars would be placed in a crash like scenario. So the purpose was to see that how would the dummies behave, and they wanted to make cars safer and safer. Now initially at that point of time, all the engineers or all the scientists who were working on building the dummies, they created a dummy based on a male European average person. So the dummy was, in terms of height, shape, dimensions, was treated as if that person would be like a average European male. What it turned out is, because of this, and this was not an intentional thing, this was just a random consensus they came up with, because all the most of the group of scientists were male European, and they thought that this is a common body type that every human on the world has. So they started building the dummies. Then they started testing the cars against all those crash collision scenarios, and realized that okay, these are the safety features that cars have to adopt, because this is what we experience based on the dummies. Just because of that one bias, despite cars having those added extra features, it was not safe for children, it was not safe for women, it was not safe for people from different places of the world, maybe like Asian people or African people or something like that. So even though they were trying to do a good thing, a very noble thing, but just because while considering the crash dummies, they did not consider the whole ecosystem of different people and different types of humans that are present, they ended up being the reason for a lot of deaths. Of course, they saved a lot of people. I'm not saying that their work does not stand any value, but had they had more inclusive team, maybe there were like more women, maybe there were people from different parts of the world, I'm pretty sure someone would have said at that time that, hey, instead of creating a dummy like this, why don't we create 4 different types of dummies to represent more set of people, and then we can do all of these tasty safety tests on the cars, and that would have saved many lives. So this is why, if you give like this example in your interviewer will start crying, because it's a true story on how an inclusive team can make a significant difference in a project or a product or the thing you are trying to build. Because everyone has different backgrounds, everyone has different experiences, different ways that they grew up. Maybe they belong to different countries, cultures, different ethnicities, different colors. Their perspective are going to be golden. If you have someone in a company who thinks like me, then why do you have that person? If both things are thinking alike, then there is something wrong of keeping both things in both people. So that's why always, whenever you think you see anything about diversity and inclusion, always be on the forefront, be an inclusive person. That always makes the world a better place. Now next thing is, can you give me an example of how you motivated others? So if I have to give this example, I can give in a couple of ways. Maybe I can talk about a time where I had to work on a project, and we were working against tight deadlines, and then we realized that we were short staffed. So I found these interns at my company, and the interns were recently joined. So I reached out to the interns that, hey, if you want to work on something cool, because they had the time and resource at their hand, but they did not had the direction. And then I reached out to management that, hey, I have found these people, they are willing to work with me, can I have your permission? And once doing that, I started teaching them, helping them, motivating them on what we are trying to do. And once we achieved the whole thing, as a result, I received my promotion, and all the interns, they received like full-time hire offer from the company that we were working for. And this is a true story. So this is a great way. I just motivated them because I explained them that this is a new thing that we are trying to do. It has major impact. It is going to be important from the company's perspective. Plus, it is a really nice skill to learn. And by doing so, you will gain much more real life experience on how things happens and how things are operating at a team. Plus, I gained experience on mentoring different people and creating more friendships. So that was a win-win for everyone. And this was my example. So this can be one of the ways I can say I have motivated others. Maybe you could have motivated someone else in some different fashion, maybe to take that leap in their career, maybe to take that leap in the new technology or new thing that they are trying to build, maybe help them to motivate them to become healthier in their lives. Even though it's not technical, still it is motivating other people to do something nice for themselves that can have lasting impact. So anything like this you can explain in your situation. Okay, now let's talk about the second category, that is problem solving. And let's see question number 11. Describe a project where you had to use your problem solving skills. So for this question, number one thing is, why did you had to use your problem solving skills? What were the problem you were trying to solve? Maybe it was a technical problem. Maybe it was a mathematical problem that no one had solution to. Maybe it was a problem with different attitudes and shifting priorities, where you had to be really creative in order to find the best path forward and bring everyone into the consensus. So all of these things you can think about as why you had to be in that situation. And after realizing this tricky situation, what solution you came up with? How did you use the problem solving approach? How did you convince others that your solution is correct? And then what was the end result you achieved? So this can be a pretty good way to explain that how do you think on different aspects and different scenarios. Okay, next one is, tell me about a time when you made a mistake and how did you handle it? No one in their careers move forward without making many mistakes. So always make sure that you must have made some mistakes at some point in time. Then explain that what was the mistake you made? Why did you made that? Maybe you did not had enough background knowledge. Maybe you did not had experience. Maybe you did not learn how to do that. Maybe the person teaching you also didn't realize that how this can be one of the odd case scenario where this issue can happen. What was the impact of the mistake? How did you own the mistake? Where you be like, yeah, I'm accountable for my mistakes. This is my approach and this is how I take, this is what I did. Now let me do this to fix it. And did you fix it? After fixing it, what did you learn? How did you convince others not to make the same mistake? So these are all the things that you can think about while creating an answer for how, like, tell me about a time when you had to handle a mistake. Okay. Next one is describe a situation where you had to be particularly attentive to details. How did you handle that? Once again, now you will start seeing a pattern about all the questions that we are discussing, that whenever you say that you have to be particularly attentive, number one question, why did you had to be attentive? Maybe it was a very critical thing. Maybe you are working with sensitive data. Maybe you are working on a sensitive product, critical timelines. Maybe you or your team had already tried to do this and you already failed like a couple of times. So this time you have to make sure that this was the way you have to move forward. So you have to make sure that you don't make any mistakes. After explaining the scenario, now how did you ensure that you are being particularly attentive? Maybe you can do like that. After completing the whole thing, you did a couple of times extra reviews to make sure you did not miss something. Maybe you try to use some automated tools to realize that what you are suggesting is correct or not. Maybe you had it peer reviewed. Maybe you reached out to your manager for the feedback. Maybe you reached out to the team for the feedback before presenting it to a broader audience, or starting to build solutions based on that. So these are the things you can disclose about them. Next is, can you talk about a time when you had to persuade others to see the things your way? Why you had to persuade others? That is the background, and now you understand the point of whole questions. Okay, why did you had to persuade others? What were their approach and how your approach was different? How your approach was going to be more sensible compared to the other ones? How did you explain that to them? So this can be a way where you can showcase your presentation skills, your persuasion abilities, your thinking abilities of thinking outside the box, treating the problem in a different manner. So same way, like American astronauts, they build these like zero gravity pens that despite costing $1 million, it can write at any angle. But then Russian scientists, they only use pencils. It was a like 50-cent solution and they saved millions of dollars. So this can be a different ways of different solutions for the same problem. Okay. So now let's go to the next question. Tell me about a time when you showed initiative at work. So initiative can be anything. Initiative can be that maybe you showed an initiative to create a new social activity at a company. Maybe you created like a new tradition at the company. Maybe you created a new group of like parents of highly capable children in your company, and then you have like 500 members, and they all share that what do they do so that they can make their children highly capable. And now you have created a great initiative for the diversity and inclusion, and also like overall social connection of the company. So that these are all parts of the initiatives. Next, there can be initiatives related to technical stuff, that maybe you were an on-premise company, you took the initiative that the next product we are trying to build, let's build it in the cloud, and let's see that what should be our approach, how cheap it is, how effective it is. Or maybe you already have an existing ongoing system, you try to change some like alerting mechanism, you try to bring in automation, DevOps to the existing framework, and that ended up saving a lot of time, but it still took some initial time to build up, and then you sort of took it upon yourself along with few other people to be in that like initiation phase to get the things rolling and start working on the things. So this can be a really good approach. Next is, describe a situation where you had to take the lead on a project. So this is very similar to a previous question we already discussed, but once again, why did you had to take the lead? What was the scenario? How did you took the lead? Maybe there was a specific problem you are trying to solve, and then you put some extra attention in order to achieve that result. Maybe some person left the company, some new project came in, some conflicting priorities happen, and then you are in the position at the right place at the right time, and without passing the baton to someone else and saying that, hey, this is not my responsibility, someone else's responsibility, you took that initiative and you rose up to the situation. You are like, no, let me take care of this project, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to convince others to do it along with me. So this can be a way to show your problem solving skills and your leadership abilities. Next one is, can you give me an example of a time when you went above and beyond your job duties? Now this is a tricky question. When you talk about above and beyond your job duties, number one, of course, you want to give some examples, maybe some project or product you are really passionate about and you are working on it for 6 months that was coming close to the deadline of launching to the production. So during that time, you had to put really extra focus and attention to make sure that you go through the production launch or release in successful manner. So for that, you might work like 2 weeks for like 12-hour days, and then in the end you made sure that the whole release was successful, and then you are really happy with all the progress you made, and maybe it was really beneficial to the company. So that's a good way to acknowledge the scenario of going above and beyond. But if you say a scenario where for like continuously 6 months, every single day you had to work like 12 or 14-hour days in order to complete a work, of course you are going above and beyond, but this is not a sustainable way. Now you are killing yourself, you are burning out, you are being less productive. Despite putting more hours, you are slowly reducing your efficiency, and you are not maintaining the work-life balance. So you are going to build up that resentment towards the company eventually. So always be careful about what intensity you define above and beyond. Okay. Now let's go to the next one. Tell me about a time when you had to innovate to solve a problem. Once again, why did you had to innovate? What type of problem it was? This question is more about the problem being so ingenuine that you have to innovate something. And what was your innovation? How did you make things easy? How did you fix it? And so yeah, the world is your oyster in this question. So make sure think about your experiences and come up with some solution for that. Okay. Next one is, describe a time when you had to make tough decisions quickly. How do you make tough decisions? Why the decision was tough? Maybe a tough example of tough decision is you might have to let someone go, layoffs. That's a very tough decision. It can take toll on any manager. Like no one wants to see lives being destroyed, but you have to take it, otherwise the company would go under. That can be a tough decision. Maybe there can be a tough decision where there is a severity one production issue going on, and you have to decide that are you going to fix it right away, in which you might have to tweak some rules that your company has set up, or you are going to go through the complete path that is going to take maybe like couple of hours extra. So the solution would be there, but still for those couple of hours, companies continuously losing money. So how do you make that decision? How do you do the calculated risk? What is your approach? How do you keep the overall team engaged? So think about these things and come up with your own answers. Okay. Next one is, how do you approach learning a new skills or technology? Provide an example. Now, change is the only constant in IT world. Every single year or every couple of years, new technologies come in, new libraries come in, new tech stack, new problems, new threats from the outside entities, whatnot. So you are always going to be learning. Now, when this question is being asked, it's not more about that how do you learn it? It's about your approach towards learning for learning something new. So your art of learning for learning a new skill. That is what you have to explain, and you can give a lot of examples. Maybe you had to any particular project or product, you have to learn a new language. Maybe you jump companies in your past, and where in one company you are working on maybe like AWS, on the other company you are working on Azure. So you had to relearn the whole thing from scratch. So there can be many examples. Just make sure that you are being humble towards your approach on learning. What are the different tools you take on, and how do you reach out to different people in the team who might be junior to you, but still you put your ego on the side and you go to them then and you ask that, hey, I don't know about this thing, can you teach me, can you explain me what should be the potential solution? So you can talk about it. Now let's move on to the next category, and that is adaptability. So for that, first let's see that, tell me about a time when you had to adopt a significant change in the workplace. What was the significant change? why that change came into the place. Maybe one of the significant change can be that previously, let's assume that all the deployments are being done manually in like dev, QA, UAT and production environment. And suddenly company came up with a mandate that starting from next month, everything has to be automated with CI/CD. You cannot do anything manual. And this is a big change. You are not used to it. Plus on top of it, you will have to deal with your existing workload. Plus you will have to deal with this new CI/CD pipeline that you will have to build. So how would you deal with it? How would you convince other team members to take part into this? So understand, like, this can be one of the examples, but feel free to create your own example. Next one is describe a situation where you had to gather information from multiple sources. How did you determine which information is most relevant? This is a very common scenario because many like long running projects, they might have many versions of documentation, and the current reality would be completely different than what is written in all of those documentations, because at some point someone just stop updating the documentation. So now you have one copy that says that, hey, things A, B, C are correct. You have another copy that says that things X, Y, Z is correct. And maybe you have some senior developer who says that no, the whole thing is actually 1, 2, 3. It's not even alphabets. So how do you correlate amongst all of these information? So the question is, first of all, you try to regroup all the different information, see that what are the different points, reach out to different people in the team who might have that idea that why the things are there the way they are. If you are still stuck and still not able to find any solution, maybe start digging into the code base, use some online tools on like compilers that can run through or iterate through the code and create these dependency graphs, see that what are the database being connected, how the transactions are flowing through, and then reverse engineer that project and create the documentation for that. I know it's a much longer path, but eventually it has to be taken at some point if you want to maintain the clear set of instructions, and then implement or create policies in the company that this type of situation does not occur in the future. So now you are maintaining the updated relevant information and what should be your approach moving forward. So this can be a good example to explain. Next one is, can you talk about a time when you had to work under pressure? Once again, why you had to work under pressure? Were you fighting against tight deadlines? Were you understaffed, under-resourced? Were you working on some critical project? Were you working on some production issues that needed to be fixed immediately? Did you miss some deadlines? Why did this happen? So, and then what was your approach working under pressure? You realize that, yeah, despite situation is intense, do you want to lose your productivity? No. So what should be your approach? How would you move forward? What are the things you would take into the consideration? How would you help others in that situation? How do you keep the communication channels alive? And how do you calm yourself? What do you say to yourself that, hey, we will get through this. Let me think it like a rational person without having so much of all of these anxiety and panics in order to complete that. Okay. Next one is, how do you handle meeting tight deadlines? I mean, everyone must have experienced this at some point. If you have some tight deadlines coming up, make sure that you prioritize the current work you have. If you have too much work on your plate, feel free to delegate that work. Or if you cannot meet the deadline, convey beforehand to the consumers that why you are not able to meet it. What are the reasonings? What are going to be the new timelines? Always assess that where your current project is, where it is heading, what are the timelines you predicted, where you are, and what should be your next steps forward. So if you continuously do that, I don't think you would be in a situation where out of the blue your project is like now 1 month delay in terms of deadlines. So it would very rarely happens if you already have all of these things present. So make sure to convey that. Okay. Next one is, describe a time when you had to learn something new in short period. How did you manage? I mean, this is just a different version of a previous question we discussed. So once again, if you have to learn something in like very short time, what is going to be the shortest way you can start learning about? Maybe you reach out to different people and just start learning the relevant information instead of going through the whole thing. Try to fix it first and then go deeper into learning the whole thing as it on its own. So this can be one of the approaches. Okay. Now let's move on to the next topic. That is the topic of adaptability. How do you ensure that you are adaptable? Once again, we are continuing on the same topic. Now, next one is, tell me about a time when you had to adapt your communication style to suit a particular audience. Now, this goes back to the previous question we discussed regarding presentation skills. Once again, if you are trying to solve a technical problem, but if you will have to explain it to a business person, you will have to use different terminology. You will have to explain that what is going to be the cost from the business standpoint. Cost as in number of people working, number of time, what are going to be the resources you are going to using in like maybe cloud or on premises in terms of servers and networking components and whatnot. If you are speaking with some technical or developer, you are going to be talking about how the packets are going to be transferred, what are the database schema going to be, how you are going to store the data, how you are going to secure all the data, what are the GDPR compliance you are going to follow, whatnot. If you are explaining this to a scrum master, you will just explain that, hey, these are the tasks we need to do, these should be the timelines, these should be the sequencing of the task, this is the purpose of each one of them. So depending on the person, team or stakeholder you are explaining the situation to, your communication needs to change, because you cannot explain the same thing to all different people. Always, that's why I have some clear examples where you had to deal with this type of situation, and then you would be golden. Next one is describe an instance where you had to work with limited resources. So limited resources can be in terms of limited time, limited number of people working on a project, or limited set of tools or technology available to you. Why you were there, what was your approach, how, if let's say that there is only one single license that you can use amongst 4 different developers in the team. So how do you make sure that who is going to work on what, and because everyone wants to use that license, how would you take care of it? So maybe you can have a license sharing situation, maybe you can create different time slots, and for one time slot person A is going to work on, for another time slot person B is going to work on, and you can create these time slots in different parts of day. So during the other times people can focus on their other duties, or maybe they can be like off work or take their like good rest to themselves. So this can be a way for better resource allocation, resource sharing. Okay, next one is, can you talk about a long-term project that you manage? How did you keep everything moving along in a timely manner? So I think I just spoke about this like 5 minutes back. For this, you need to ensure that every frequent weeks you are keeping track of that, what were your expected timelines, what are your current timelines, how close you are with the expectation, how further away you are you running in the red, are you running in the orange, are you running in the green, are you ahead of schedule, are you behind the schedule, are you way behind the schedule? If you are way behind or behind the schedule, how do you adjust your timelines? How do you convey this message to the broader team, broader stakeholders, why you started falling behind in the timeline? How do you keep tracking of this maybe for like next 2 years, because some projects they run like 2 to 4 years as well in some cases. So how do you keep all of these things checked? For that you need clear set of policies and processes in place that you follow rigorously for the entirety of that time with clear discipline, and always have all of the entire audit trail of all the things that happened and all the decisions were made during that time. Okay, next question is, tell me about a time when you had to balance competing priorities and how did you handle it? So an example for competing priorities could be, maybe you are working on project A that is coming to a deadline. Maybe the project is not so significant, like the product is relatively in low value or low impact, but that is coming closer to the deadline. Meanwhile, you are being asked that this project B is really critical, but it is due in next 6 months. And so how do you manage that competing priorities? Because on one hand, you have this product that is pretty close coming to just end of its task, but you still want to make sure that you finish strong and you complete all the responsibilities. On the other side, you have this new project that is really important in terms of priority, but you still have some time in between. So maybe you can put some more effort initially to complete this project and get rid of it from your schedule, and then put more focus towards B. Or maybe you can start allocating like 30%, 70% weight towards both the projects. You discuss this with your manager or your product owner, that what is the importance of each one of them, and that way it would give you clear indication on how much time you want to allocate, that is going to yield the most impact for yourself, for your company, and for your projects. So that is the important part. Okay, next one is describe a situation where you had to be patient in order to achieve your goal. Again, long running projects, you had to be very patient. Next, maybe you might have to be patient for that next technical thing you are planning to do. Maybe you were supposed to do last year, but then things change, priorities change. Now you are expecting to do it this year, but still you realize that you couldn't make it. How do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep your team motivated? Do you have that ability of patience? Can you set up the clear timelines and clear roadmaps for the path moving forward? So these sort of things. Okay. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is communication, and let's go to the question number 31. Describe a situation where you had to use your communication skills to resolve a conflict. Again, pretty simple, pretty easy. Maybe you realize that there is some ongoing conflict between two peoples or two teams, maybe two like yourself and your manager and whatnot. How do you resolve that? Just simple thing. Bring everything together, investigate what is the problem, and then come up with the solution. Explain to each one of them that why they are in this situation, how can they get out of it, what should be the approach moving forward, and what would be like a common solution that everyone can come up with with consensus. So you can think of your emotional intelligence and your communication skills to come up with the solution. That tell me about a time when you had to give critical feedback to someone. How did you approach it? Now there is a very common saying, praise in public and criticize in private. Follow the same rule. If you realize that maybe some of the employee or someone regarding some of their behavior or their skills, they are lacking something and you feel like your feedback would make an improvement, feel free to go ahead. It's always a good practice to give proper, accurate, critical feedback to anyone and everyone, and also give it in a manner that they take it well. Show them that exactly what is your intention, why did you wanted to do that, how would you approach it. You approach it calmly, gently. You give them specific examples, and you also give them that how can they improve on the current situation. Plus confirm with them that they don't feel discouraged because you mentioned these things and you are just trying to help them out. You are trying to do what's best for the company and what's best for their own personal growth. So that can be your approach. You can explain this type of all the considerations in your interview, and it's going to look really nice. Okay, next one is describe a project where you took a creative approach to solve a problem. I think we already took care of very similar problems in the past, so I'm just going to skip ahead with this question, but make sure that you explain the situation where and how you become creative, and talk about all the different aspects of the problems and situations and your ingenuine solution. Okay, next one is, can you provide me an example of a time when you had to juggle several projects at a time? This is pretty common because at any given moment you might be working somewhere between like 3 to 15 projects, depending on like how complex your work schedule are and how stretched up resources are. So always set clear priorities, and the priorities defined by the impact, by the type of deadlines, by the work that needs to be done, the skill level, the current project status, and all of these things. So there is no one particular reason about this. There is a huge topic about how do I manage expectations and how do I manage priorities. In my opinion, it is more of an art than a rigorous set of rules. You always have to juggle about these different things and think about, oh, hey, this needs to be done. Let me quickly fix that. This is important. Let me work upon this. This is important. Let me work upon this. On top of it, at the same time, you will also have to realize that you only have limited time at your hand, so you don't put too much on your plate. If you realize that there are some low priority items, just be confrontational or be open-minded about it and just let the team know that this can be done later or this can be done by someone else. Feel free to delegate your work. Delegation is a great way to manage multiple items without losing the efficiency. So always do proper delegation, manage priorities, and explain that what are your effective strategies to manage priorities basically. Next question is, how do you prioritize your work when you have multiple projects to handle? I think it's pretty much the same question, so I'm just gonna go ahead. Okay. Next one is, describe a time when you had to use your negotiation skills. So you have to negotiate on many different aspects at your job. Many times you have to negotiate with the clients, with the consumers, with your vendors, with the existing team members about the work you needs to be done, maybe with other team members, because you want to convince them that your project that you are suggesting or the work you are trying to do has more priorities, and you are willing to complete it with these many resources under this time frame. So what is your negotiation approach? Always come to a common ground, understand that what are all the different options available, and try to find the best path possible for each one of them. And before you start negotiating, always understand that what is going to be the end result, because many times you are negotiating with let's assume that you are working at a company and you are negotiating from someone else from a different company. You are trying to sell your product to that company. You do all of these negotiations and you go through the whole process for 3 months. After 3 months, you realize that now that person also has to ask someone else to make that decision, which means maybe the whole negotiation process can restart again and you just wasted a lot of time. So always come to that conclusion, that what are going to be the criteria that would be agreeable by both, who are going to be the stakeholders making these decisions, and what are the different negotiating approaches you would take. Always try to use the Nash equilibrium concept, that is, do what's best for both, and you will always find a common ground over there. Okay. Next one is, tell me about a time when you had to manage conflicting priorities. Yeah, we just spoke about it. Moving on to the next question, that is, how do you handle constructive criticism? Really important topic. They really wants to know that are you a person who can take feedback? Basically, that's it. If you are doing something wrong and if someone else tells you that you are doing it wrong, do you become more defensive or do you become more attentive towards what they are saying? And then rather than discrediting them or saying that no, this is not why I did that, just be open-minded. Hey, maybe I made a mistake. Everyone makes a mistake. Thank you so much for pointing it out. I'll try to find a solution, but if you already know that what can be a better approach, also let me know. I can think about it, understand or gain that expertise, and then take it with me so that next time I don't make the same mistake. That's a great attitude. If you can find a person who can take the constructive criticism in a better manner and work on that, improve on that, and make sure to not to repeat the same mistake twice, that person would end up becoming like probably the most successful employee or even the CEO of your company, because that is the correct right mindset you want. Everyone makes the mistake. The question is, how many unique mistakes you can make, and the more unique mistakes you make, the smarter you are going to become. And I'm focusing my emphasis on the word unique, because you don't want to make the same mistake again and again. That's just the definition of insanity. Okay. So now moving on to the next question. Can you describe a time when you had to communicate complex information clearly? Maybe there are some exact requirements that needs to be met. Maybe you need to convey the message to different teams and you want to ensure that the integrity of information remains constant. They all understand. So how do you do that? One approach is, you explain what you are showing, you note it down, write it down, have a SharePoint, share it with everyone. Plus you reach out to them and confirm that did they understand what you are trying to convey. Gather that information, make sure that you both are on the same page so you don't miss out the important details in the somewhere between communication, and then there is some misunderstanding and in the end you are expecting to have almonds and you get peaches. So don't be like that. Okay. Next one is, describe a situation where you had to actively listen to someone and understand their perspective. This can be, once again, go back to my very previous examples I gave about an employee not pulling their weight. Just because I was trying to understand their situation, I was putting more emphasis on listening what they had to say, understanding what they had to suffer. And it wasn't like initially that employee was reluctant to give me the whole story on why that employee is not able to do and why he's not meeting the deadlines. But somewhere along the lines, I understood that maybe there might be some other issues apart from the work related thing that might be hampering that decision and the work efficiency. And that was the case. So active listening is a lot of parts. It is trying to understand person's scenario. It involves a lot of emotional intelligence and read a lot of reading between the lines. Plus, you need to be attentive that you are understanding what each and everything that other person is conveying to you without any like biases or judgments or whatnot. So make sure to give an example that elaborate this kind of scenario that would really look good for your behavioral interviews. Okay. Now the last topic, that is leadership. Now this topic is mostly going to be for folks who are applying for like more senior level positions, maybe like managerial or director level or VP level position. And I'm pretty sure that they must have done hundreds of interviews throughout their career. So they might have most of the idea. I don't have much leadership experience, but if I have to give an example or if I am taking an interview, these are the things I would be expecting. So this is what I would explain for each one of the questions. And again, make sure to make your own answers, make your own, reflect your own self and see where the answer suits you. Okay. Give me an example of a goal you set and how did you achieve it? So goal can be for your personal self or maybe for your team or for your company, for your project. Maybe it can be a short-term goal, long-term goal. How did you keep track of it? How did you ensure that you are moving in the correct direction? If you face any setbacks, how did you get out from that? So these are all the things you can talk about it. If I have to talk about it, I can talk about my YouTube channel, because initially like that was not my goal, but after making like somewhere around 50-60 videos, it became my goal that I want to initially start talking about like all the data structure and algorithm related questions. Then I started talking about system design concepts. Then I started talking about behavioral interviews. Then I'll start talking about maybe different languages. So my goal post is to create like this broader ecosystem of channel that contains a lot of information that is going to be helpful for all the folks in their career. So that's my goal. Now next question is, have you ever had to make an unpopular decision? How did you handle the feedback? Unpopular decision can be anything. Maybe there is a service or a perk you are cutting out. Maybe you have to lay off some people. Maybe you have to change some things in a company that is going to impose some stricter policies that might create an additional workload or headache for different people, but it can be helpful in the long run. So how did you handle the feedback? First, you make sure to convey your message that why you are taking this step, and then realize that what are the concerns different teams are coming back up with. Have that open-mindedness, have that like active listening component to it. Realize that what is the feedback. Maybe there might be some things that you might have missed. So if that is the case, how did you handle it? Can you try to go ahead and fix it? Are you able to take yourself accountable that, hey, this is the thing I proposed to do, but I forgot about these 3 different dimensions or options, and let me fix that. I'm accountable for that. I'm responsible for that, and I'm making that change. So it always shows you as a better human being. Okay. Next one is, have you ever worked on a project that failed? How did you learn from that experience? Like almost everyone has worked on some project that failed. Maybe it failed because of lack of resources, or the product didn't do well, or the product you built was not very viable. Maybe some other competitor came up with a better product that it eventually died, or maybe you never finished the project. Maybe the priorities change. Maybe the resources working on were not there, and it went way over budget or way out of bounds. Like the failed projects are the best test case scenario that helps you grow significantly, because then you would know that these are the 10 things I should not be doing. Think of Thomas Alva Edison. Edison failed to make the light bulb first 1000 times. Still kept on trying with better material, different methods. Eventually, we are all living in the world of electricity. So that's the approach. Okay. Next one is, can you give me an example of how you handled high stress situation? I think I spoke about this earlier, but still like working under pressure and going above and beyond for your job. So this is very similar to that. But when you are speaking about like leadership level high stress. Stress can be with like bad company results, maybe having a product not do its job, or you might have to lay off some people, or you realize that your entire portfolio is going to change. How would you deal with that? So you always try to keep yourself calm, think about all the different options, different parameters. If you can, seek advice, reach out to different people, take feedback, think out loud. Always writing always helps whenever you are in a precarious situation. So these can be different coping mechanisms you can take on hand. Next one is, tell me about a time when you had to take responsibility for an error made by someone else. I can give you a very good example. This was like Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Now, for those who don't know, he is an Indian president, and he was also a scientist who was working on a lot of like satellite launches for India, for Indian Space Research Organization. So he once gave an example where he was like, he was working on a project, and they tried to launch the satellite, but it failed mid-air and then it crashed. And that time it was a huge setback for the company. Now at that time he mentioned that he was the project manager, he was responsible for that failure, but his director came out in public in press and said everyone that the director said that I failed. I made a judgment call. Maybe this was an error. We understand that this was the fault. We assess all the failures, and now we are going to work upon it to fix our mistakes, and then we will make sure that we move forward with the success. Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, he became like really like questioned that why, because he knew that he was responsible, and still that director had faith in him. He's like, don't worry, I have faith, everyone makes the mistake. Now we will have to make sure that we deliver it successfully. And after 2 years, they launched the same satellite with success, and that paved a path for which like all the achievements that Indian Space Research Agency made in their space program. So you can understand that how a leadership position person being accountable for himself while motivating his or her team is actually making significant impact for the accountability, and also shielding the inner team from a lot of that outside of bounds, or outside of like negativity that could be coming out. So always, if you have such experiences, feel free to share it and explain that why did you do that and what was the outcome of it. Okay. Next question is that how do you assess success of a project? Give an example. Like couple of common example: on time and on budget. These are the two major factors. Next one is, once the project has been deployed or is running in the production or consumers are using, what is the response, how they are taking it, how they are treating it, what people has to say about it. For that you have to take constant feedbacks. Plus you can also learn that can your project become a framework for other projects that you are going to do in the future. Then it makes it a legendary project. So these are all the different parameters, and you can also explain for each project that you worked upon. You can give like 2-3 examples that this project I worked upon, I feel like success was building and delivering a critical application in like shorter time frame using the completely new tech stack with like 5 different teams working in tandem to get it done. So this can be also one of the examples. Okay. Next is, tell me about a time when you had to decide without all the information you needed. So maybe you are in some high stress high stress scenario, and you have to make a decision, because if you wait to gather all the information, it might be too late, or you might be losing too much money. So there is a fine line you will have to cross between like efficiency and defiance. That you don't want to define, you don't want to be that dictatorial person that, hey, just because I said so, do it. But you also want to make sure that you are taking the calculated risk, that if you take this option or this option without having all the background or all the key information, what are going to be their different approaches. And if you ever have to face that situation, then yeah, feel free to explain that. Next one is, describe a situation where you had to analyze the data and make a recommendation. What approach did you take? There have been very famous movies on analyzing data and then making some decisions, like Moneyball and Big Short. If you haven't watched them, go ahead and watch them. But in your case, if you have to make some decisions based on the data, first realize that what type of data you are dealing with and what type of decision you are making. Maybe you are trying to make a decision that in your existing company, you are currently operating in 3 different regions. Now you want to operate in 2 more regions and you have these 7 regions to pick from. What are going to be the criteria you would be looking for? So in that case, data would be what is the property rates, what are the what type of census is there, how many number of people are living, what are their nationalities, ethnicities, culture groups, what are the products you are trying to ship or deploy, what is going to be the logistics, what are going to be the cost of each one of them, what are the prospects of earning money. So these are the data that you should be looking at, and based on that you would be able to make decisions. Plus right now you can also use a lot of like data science and machine learning and AI to make decisions using the data, because data is a huge commodity and that can give you great insight on the future predictor of things that you are trying to do. So that's why always take data very seriously. Next question is, have you ever faced an ethical dilemma at work? How did you handle it? Like, I personally have never faced an ethical dilemma, but I can give you an example. Like maybe, say for an example, you realize that one of your employee who works under you, and that employee did something unintentional. You know for sure that that employee did something unintentional, and they realize that that was their mistake. Now the question is, if you go out and say the same thing to the HR, that employee is for sure getting fired. Now, if you don't say it to the HR, you are not doing your job as a manager. The other thing is that the unintentional wrong thing that employee did, maybe it was wrong, but the impact was not. Like no one got hurt, nobody got impacted, but it was a wrong thing to do. So this is the ethical dilemma. How do you approach it? So first you assess all the situations. Like if I personally have to do it, I might give like a slap on the wrist for that employee if they unintentionally did it and they realize their mistake. If they intentionally did it, for sure I'm going to complain to the HR. But if it is unintentional and maybe, hey, mistakes anyone can make and they didn't know and it caused no harm, but I will give like a written email showing that, hey, these are the things you did, they should not have been done, and like warning, like maybe strike 1 and strike 2 at the same time. But I would make sure, I would try at least that that person does not lose his or her job and then maybe ruin their entire career. So this would be one of the ethical dilemmas that I can think of. Okay. Next one is, describe a situation where you had to took a risk and paid off. Once again, taking calculated risk, understanding all the information. Maybe you have all the relevant data, maybe you don't have all the relevant data. If you have the data, how would it impact your judgment? If you don't have the data, how would it impact your judgment? So think of these things, and this concludes all the 50 answers. Now, once again, for all the 50 answers, I hope you were following along, and I'm sorry if I kept on and on about different questions, but make sure that for these questions you have your own set of answers. Now let's move on to the next topic, and that is dealing with difficult questions. So once again, no questions are made equal. Some questions might be easy, some questions might be difficult, some questions might be easy for some people, some question might be easy for difficult people. So it depends, varies from people to people, but always make sure that you understand that why the question is difficult. And that's where it came along that, hey, if you are giving the question that give me an example where you had to persuade the others. The important crux of this question is, why did you had to persuade the others? What was the exact scenario? And then what was your approach on persuading others for what you are trying to propose? So this can be one of the examples. Next thing is, whenever you have to speak about or talk about different weaknesses and failures of yourself, be open to that. Many times I've seen and I personally experienced that in the past as well, that I was always too reluctant to talk about my failures and the mistakes I made or weaknesses I had. But as I grew more mature in my career, I realized that this is what made me what I am today. All the mistakes I did, all the weaknesses I had, and I had to overcome that. That gave me a huge confidence boost. It gave me the sincerity of how wrong things can happen, how can I learn from that, how can I move away from that, why should I not carry it on my shoulder as a burden, but rather than use it as a footstep to climb that next step and learn that next thing. So always understand that. These are some of the strategies you can have on yourself whenever you are dealing with a difficult question. First, try to stay calm and composed. You can ask the interviewer that, hey, can I take like a 30-second pause or a 1-minute pause, just to think about the formula, how to formulate the answer, what are all the aspects I'm going to talk about it. Maybe make some bullet points in your head and then start formalizing the answer using the STAR methodology. Okay, so this can be one of the good approaches. Always try to stay calm. Even if you encounter some questions that are like way out of your imagination, at least stay calm. Like previously, Google used to ask this funny question that why manhole covers are circle and not square in the New York City. Makes no sense, but still they ask. They ask many people the same questions. What you are going to do if you don't know the answer? Well, some people be like, if I want to go down straight, I don't want to get myself hurt across 90-degree angles. So it was, that was a pretty good answer actually. So there can be many examples. Okay. Now let's understand that how can you incorporate emotional intelligence in your interview and in your answers. Emotional intelligence is something that comes with practice and seeing things the way they are and the way they are not. It's like trying to understand both sides of the coin and how it can come into your answers or your interview. You always wants to be empathize and try to find the root of the cause. So again, even if the interviewer is asking you a question, try to understand that what is the root behind this question. What is the purpose they are looking for? Or if you are giving some answer, did you thought about all the scenarios? Were you dealing with empathy? So these are the things you want to always make sure that you want to be demonstrating that you are a person who has a lot of empathy for different people, and that makes the situation 10 times lighter. Plus, if you are self-aware about your behavior and what human tendencies other people can do, then it helps you make more sense of the situation and try to tread the waters carefully. Okay. And of course, make sure that you balance the professional and personal lives and scenarios. You don't mix them. It's never a good idea. So always do that. So emotional intelligence in action is, if you want, there are actually a lot of movies that have emotional intelligence in action. But think about Michael Keaton from The Dark Knight Rises, the original Dark Knight, where he's explaining to Bruce Banner or Bruce Wayne that why Joker was doing all of these things. And then he explained the things about that some men just want to watch the world burn. So you can't reason with them, you can't argue with them, but you just have to deal with him. And that gave Batman an idea that how to deal with the Joker. So this can be, that shows that the butler, Michael Keaton in that movie, is a person with extreme emotional intelligence and sees the world from different angle. Now, this is nowhere near in terms of correlation with your actual interview, but it's just an example. Okay, next topic is non-verbal communication. How do you behave and how do you speak without speaking? This is really important. Your body posture and gestures, they make significant difference. So how do you take care of it? Your body language, you need to sit up in like a good manner, try to sit straight, try to look them in the eye, try to smile here and there. Everyone likes a smiling face. And try to use like your hand gestures, your body gestures in a decent manner. Use the space around that is currently available in the room. Now with the interviews, there are now always going to be two scenarios. Either you are giving on-premise interview or on-site interview, or you are giving a virtual interview. In both scenarios, the consideration for non-verbal communication would be completely different. If you are in person, in place, how do you ensure that your non-verbal communication is on point? Smile here and there, have a good eye contact, make sure that you are sitting at a reasonably well distance. Even if a conference room has a huge table, you don't want to sit too close with each other, you don't want to sit too away from each other. Just like use the space around yourself, but don't use it too crazily or too aggressively. Just be overall in the moment. So that is going to feel really good. Plus have like smiling facial expression. Don't have creepy smiles or something like that, but just like everyone loves a smiling face. Next thing is, if you have to talk about the virtual interviews, few topics would be at least try to look directly in the camera. Try to make sure that your background is clear or you are using appropriate filters. Your mic is working. You are reasonably well dressed. Your hair looks good. Your face looks good. You are at least being presentable for that interview, and you are giving it the sincerity that interview deserves. So always be mindful of that. And now let's talk about some of the important preparation strategies. I know we have been talking quite a lot about all the different preparation strategies we can have throughout this entire session, but now let's just talk about few of them. Number one, make sure to write all the stories and all the experiences that you had. Ideally, for each of the 5 categories we talk about, maybe have like 3 stories for each one of them. If you have like somewhere around 15 to 20 stories, you are set. You would be able to give all of the different options, and any type of questions can be asked. Now you just have to pinpoint, okay, in order to explain the disagreement with myself with a colleague, this is the story I'm going to say. In order for a disagreement from myself with a client, this is what I'm going to explain, whatnot. And always make sure that you are practicing everything with STAR methodology: situation, task, action, result, all four things, because that way you are following up the whole timeline of the question. You are taking the interviewer throughout the exact situation and also ending up at what was the result achieved in the end. So practice the STAR method. For each of the stories that you are going to write, at least write 1 or 2 points that is going to be just for yourself, so you can quickly remind yourself that, hey, this was the situation and this was the action we took and this was what we did. Okay. Next thing is, if you can, do mock interviews. This is going to be really important. Find your friends, find some group, maybe there are some online communities, reach out to them, find some strangers, you take their mock and you give mock interviews to them. This is going to be a win-win for both of you. You would be able to see from the perspective of an interviewer, whenever someone else is giving the answer, that how does it feel and what was your intent and did they justify your intent or not. And the more interviews you give, the better and sharper your answers will get. So always, I cannot emphasize enough, if you just do mock interviews, you would be set. And just any curveball, any random questions can be thrown at you. Be in the moment. This is a great opportunity for you to outshine yourself, to show the interviewer that what type of person you are, what type of character you have, what are the experiences you have learned. So behavioral interview, in my opinion, is a great way to showcase your skill. And that's why take it as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. And it's going to be really helpful. Now we are going to talk about few resources. So number one, just take these 2 books. They are really popular books: Cracking the Coding Interview or 101 Great Answers to the Toughest Interview Questions. Like, there are online copies available. There are copies on the Amazon available. Pick whatever you want to. And if you are a reader, just go through them. There are lot of online courses available on LinkedIn Learning, Coursera and Udemy. Plus this course, you already have this. So I did not mention YouTube, but since you are already watching this on YouTube, so of course YouTube is also going to be there. There are some popular subreddits on the Reddit website. So if you want to go to like jobs or interviews or CS career questions specifically for tech jobs, all these 3 are really good, really popular. They help you out with the resume reviews and questions and answers, so you can understand what type of questions are being asked, what are the expectations at different companies. They also help you with like negotiation strategies and salaries and whatnot. Okay. Next one, couple of really good websites: levels.fyi, because it shows a lot of different things on different companies, how they behave and what are the benefits they have, the perks they have, the employees they have, the compensation they have, and plus they have a very good community page, so that they have a very active community where you can post many questions. And next one is Glassdoor, where the appropriate employees of any particular company leave their experiences and reviews for that company, so that can come in really handy.